All right, welcome to our first member call of 2022. Big thank you to Andrew Pope for joining us and sharing your insights on this topic. I've had the pleasure of working with Andrew actually for quite some years now. Andrew helped host our Future Workplace community, also has been a very popular speaker at both our European and North American conference. And then we were small talking for those of you who joined earlier on how Andrew is moving back to Australia, right?
Yes. For I don't know how long for, but it's time to be in Australia for a bit. We're a split family. Two of us were born in Australia, two of us are born in the UK, so we're always going to be, I think, going back and forth. But the next stage is there. But I'm still going to be doing work for European companies. I think a lot of what I'm doing now is asynchronous and or generally quite flexible. So it's interesting to see that, like, the one thing that's the constant is work. Everything else is going to change. So, a whole amount of chaos ahead, but work is carrying on much the same. So it's nice to have something that's going to be, like, reasonably reliable.
Very good. Thank you, Andrew. So let's hear more about playing games to find focus. I think playing games was more like a distraction.
Well, sometimes you need to be distracted to reflect and see where you're at, and I'll touch on that. But yeah, it is a good point. So thanks everyone for joining, and a wee bit of background on sort of what I've been doing, and to give you context of sort of my experience and background to creating all of this. I've been doing quite a lot of workshops lately for customers around hybrid working and digital team skills. This is before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and the sort of the ever looming hybrid work, which isn't quite coming as we expect it, because obviously waves of COVID keep happening, and things are still in this mostly remote kind of working realm. So I've been helping clients really with the sort of the key behaviors and habits to be good digital teams. And I'm also currently working with a global sciences firm around just digital transformation and leading a change community for Microsoft 365 there. Also co-wrote a book, Designing Collaboration, a few years ago with Alistair Webb in Australia. Had a go at building a chatbot in the first lockdown, which couldn't actually figure out what to do with that, but it's like, it's my little lockdown story. And other than that, I'm at the moment in North Yorkshire in the UK, where I try and get out running in the hills. That'll obviously change in a few weeks in Australia, when I will be a lot hotter in the face than that picture. But all this experience has sort of helped create lots of content around bringing in skills for digital change, and this really transpired from once I knew that workshops were kind of like the key to actually helping either stakeholders, steering groups, or even just individual teams design their own solutions. A workshop is fairly useless without content. It's like, if you start with a blank canvas, in theory you can go anywhere. It's like you talk about blue sky thinking. It's big, but it doesn't necessarily create a safe space for everybody to contribute, and you don't necessarily get a sense of what really is going on. So myself, along with a couple of partners in Australia, we came up with an approach where you can articulate the problem by collectively finding what's important and what we need to do better. And this can be done at a team, department, or organization level. From that, we find what gets in the way, what issues are going to impede us. And these can be cultural issues, technological barriers, habits, all the things that typically get in the way of any kind of change. But then there's a load of solutions. There's cards that can be dealt out either physically or digitally, depending on the circumstances, and that's where the game component comes in. And so this is one such pack of cards, which this is a sort of curated set of there's around 50, which kind of help tackle sort of more common issues, but there's a whole lot more depending on the workshop. But what the cards do is they enable people to have a bit of a voice and get a chance to discuss things that we want to try, rather than just imposing a solution on somebody to say this is how we're going to work as a team, this is how we're going to work in Microsoft Teams. Yeah, every team is different, and yeah, every individual is different, and sometimes we need to actually find some practices and things that work for us, that meet a particular need that our team has, or that we feel as an organization has an issue with. So a little bit more detail on these cards and the approach. So we came up with the thing called Digital Team Builder. So that's in essence the whole workshop resources, all the cards. So in total there's over 150. I briefly showed you a sort of the 50 team play cards, so a sort of quick play for more specific issues, such as always on, too many meetings, etc. I've used these with UK government clients to develop their hybrid working strategies on Microsoft Teams. So they have been tried and tested, and now have been adopted as a sort of a practical way of work. And they're all based on good collaboration best practice, focused on digital working. So the strategies come from the book that I mentioned earlier on, that I co-authored, and the practice cards are derived from practical experience. What works? What are people doing? What am I learning from other organizations? I'm working with other companies, and I'm not necessarily always telling them what to do. I'm learning what they're doing, and there's some great ideas around there. And this is all being absorbed to continually evolve these cards, so that they should be reasonably current in reflecting what are the typical challenges we're facing in the workplace. Now, one set, I mentioned about finding goals. Now, finding goals is really, really important, because if we are trying to embed a organizational change, or even if we're just trying to improve something as a team, it's really important to know what it is we're trying to improve. And these cards are worded in a way where they just reflect simple ways of work or outcomes that as a group people can choose. Are these important? Are these important that we do well? Are these important that we don't do well? And the ones we don't do well suddenly becomes crucial. Like, okay, this is something we need to focus on. And I'll touch on this in a little bit, but in client workshops, there's one or two that really stand out, and they're generally quite consistent because they do reflect the culture or sort of typical working practices, and that helps us find an issue that we can focus on, and then that can take you through the whole process. Now, these have surfaced the issue of lack of focus, which is obviously the topic of today's session. So I'll come on to that very shortly. But this is how this has all come from. There can be a deep way of finding goals. Alternatively, we can just say, what's most important? Is it too many meetings? Is it we're always on? Is it that we're in digital silos, we're not talking to other teams? Or we can pick some fairly predictable things to focus on. So then also we have the solutions, the things, the game cards that people can then actually select. So again, these are either virtual, which can be done in virtual workshops, or even just dragged and dropped in Teams channels and Yammer and Workplace or whatever other digital tools are being used. So there's a range of strategy cards that are sort of high level, either things that you might want to do at an enterprise level to start helping engineers some better collaborative practices, or at a team level, but there may be a slightly, require a team level effort. So, it's something that does require a bit more planning. But then there's also a load of everyday practice cards, and these are things that we can do, straight away. These are things that as an individual, we can do right now to start embedding a change. And these will typically be either dealt out in a room. I might sit in a workshop, and I'll just deal out randomly cards and then get people to talk about them and which ones do they want to try in response to the topic of the workshop or the goal that we've set. Or in a virtual environment, they can be put into a board and split into maybe breakout rooms, and you give each breakout half a dozen cards, 20 cards. It doesn't really matter too much depending on how many people you've got. And they discuss them and agree as a breakout, these are what we want to try. And it's not me telling people what to do. It's just giving some practical experiences and ideas that allow solutions to form. And more often than not, other solutions, other issues come out that team or that group of stakeholders decide is helpful, because half of this is just talking points. These cards just get people talking. They get the problems surfaced. They get possible new ways surfaced, and then you can sort of move the conversation forward. But again, like, if you're asking people, what are we going to do? How are we going to improve this? How are we going to cut down on meetings or whatever it is? It's quite often you start off with just silence. So it's very helpful to have some talking points already. The case study that I mentioned before. So this is for a UK government agency, and the initial engagement was around, it was pre-COVID, and it was really around improving digital collaboration. And then as the pandemic evolved and we all went into lockdown, it suddenly became, right, what's our way out of this? What are the skills we want to focus on as sort of hybrid working, which it was predominantly working from home, distributed working, but doing it in a way that will evolve into some sort of hybrid model. And these were all carried out remotely because we're all in lockdown, and these were done in Mural, but also I've done it in Miro and in Microsoft Whiteboard and all the other things. And it took through exactly the same approach, identifying the issues, the goals, the blockers, and running it with groups of stakeholders and representative teams who can then actually decide what they were going to do. So we ran it through for a few stakeholder groups who got a sense of organizationally, what are the issues? And then we ran it through some specific defined teams. What are their issues? What do they want to do? And from that, we came up with some fairly common ways of work that people wanted to do, but also we came up with some very specific challenges. And this is where the lack of focus came up. Everybody was struggling to find focus because there was this sense of being always on, notification overload, but also a lack of focus in a way that everyone was very blinkered and heads down and just working. And I'm sure this is quite familiar to many of you, that it's quite relentless at times. And we were seeing that the focus was on doing work, but not necessarily on doing work well. Nobody was actually being challenged or challenging themselves on, should I be doing this? Should I be stopping? And in the office, in the old world, we would actually have some natural prompts, some natural ways of reflecting on what we're doing and stopping and finding focus, whether it would be through distractions or through a less digital first way of working. And we were discovering that there were some real problems, and it was one of the big issues was to find a way of actually finding a way of having some focus time to reflect on what actually is important. Are we doing this well? Who are we talking to? Are we talking to the right people? All these things that were being very quickly forgotten as we tended to hunker down on our own team and just sort of interact with the same group of people day to day. And there were a few other goals that came up, but it really helped drive the conversations and drive the approach of like, well, let's give people the cards and find and see what they wanted to do themselves. And I'd like to do this with you as well. Obviously, I can't do it in a sort of the same informal or sort of, I'd say, focused workshop environment, but we can do it in a slightly different way using the power of Microsoft Forms and of my glamorous assistant Janus. And so I'll ask you some questions. So there's one question, and then I'd like you to choose which thing you'd like to try. So I'm going to virtually deal out some cards, and there's going to be 6 of them, and you can choose one or more. And once I've gone through the cards, Janus will share the poll. In theory, he's new at this, so we'll have to we'll be kind to him. And you'll it's just a way of thinking what technique would you like to try. So what will help you find ways to focus in your digital work? And so first card, share details about how you like to work. Encourage your team colleagues to do the same. So this really comes about from that visibility of who you are and how you prefer to work, because sometimes we're getting bombarded in different channels. There's not necessarily a clear expectation of where we can be found or how we can be contacted. We're getting communication in all sorts of places, and say, we might be getting emails, we might be in a Teams, numerous Teams channels, we might be receiving phone calls. But sometimes just putting our own personal preferences helps our colleagues understand how to contact us, but also when not to contact us. Sometimes it's okay to say, please don't contact me this afternoon, or Monday mornings I'm just going to be focusing on my emails, and putting that out there, because without expectations we tend to make up expectations, which can be totally wildly off the mark. People actually don't care if you're not available unless it's urgent. It's fine to be out, it's fine to be going for a run if you need that. It's just putting these things out into the open. And these have proved very popular in workshops. The amount of people in teams that say, I really want to do this, I want to actually have permission to say, I'm not around at this time. The second one is just around the structuring how we work. So that let's say, for example, this is in Microsoft Teams, we set up our membership of a team, so we know who is there, but also that the group is a low number, so ideally less than 10. If it's more than that, potentially it's a forum or a community. It might not really be a core team. It might not be your core work, and it's having these things blurred. If you are using Microsoft, or you're using other tools, but you have like a core team tool, and you have other tools like Yammer, or you have sort of social tools. Sometimes knowing where your team working is, where your core deliverable work is, and ring fencing that, making that's the priority, that's the immediate interactions I need. And maybe some things that you're getting notifications on in Teams, maybe they're communities, maybe they're forums, maybe they need to be seen as differently, and perhaps in theory these can be muted if they're not important. But it's just knowing what you're doing and where is the right place for this. Next up is around team working. Now this card, I'm specifically using the term Microsoft Teams. I do have non-Microsoft cards and Microsoft cards, because 90% of people are using Microsoft 365, and I think it gives a bit of clarity in using the tools. But there's also a set that don't mention the tools for for people that are using G Suite or Workplace, and the competitors, let's say. But let's say we are using Microsoft Teams. Creating a channel for each deliverable or topic, so that all your conversations are held in that space instead of email or chat. So you've got, for example, a stakeholder design or a stakeholder planning deliverable in your work. All the conversations that would have about this go into that channel, so they're all threaded and in the same place, and not in email or chat. So everything in that conversation, where it is, and the notifications you're getting are also relevant. And also it just keeps things focused. So again, that kind of helps keeps the distractions away by knowing why you're in this team or in this channel, rather than things are all over the place. So it's very, very, very nice to kind of keep your conversations focused and separate from other channels. The next one's around meetings. Another thing it does challenge our focus time is the amount of meetings, particularly status update meetings, which I feel can be very easily replaced with an asynchronous meeting. So these can be done in a thread. These can be done in a tool like Teams. If we're just after responses, if all we're after is somebody saying, today this is my schedule, these are my barriers, these are the people I'm talking to, these are things I need help with. That can be done in a threaded conversation, in a series of posts, rather than in a meeting, because then also we can dip in and out when we need to. So we can run this maybe over a morning and allow people to post, like a Monday morning update, and then we can respond when we need to. We can actually respond to somebody directly, and rather than taking over the whole meeting. So it keeps it a little bit more focused, and it also frees up a bit more time, and we can save meetings more for discussions around problems or decisions where we actually might need a bit of input. Another card which has I think become quite popular in a lot of workshops is just around making digital spaces safe to speak. Again, this helps us to focus, because if we have some form of, let's say, a token or a hashtag where we're okay to speak up, sometimes it's important just to say, I'm struggling. I don't have the headspace right now for what it is we're working on, the meetings, whatever's evolving, we can actually be honest and say, I need help. You know, I might need to take some time out. I might need to just step away for a couple of hours. I might need to miss this meeting because, and you know, sometimes that's not necessarily going to be an option, but sometimes it might be the best thing. So just having a more safe team working environment can really help. And having a token is actually surprisingly helpful. You know, it means it does create a metaphor, but it does, you know, I think metaphors are really helpful because it gives us something to hold up and say, okay, this is our safe token, this is our, you know, our safe mark, or we just use the hashtag, and it does give us permission. And finally, creating an operating charter. Probably one of the most popular cards in all of the workshops, because simply it just formalizes how we collaborate. So let's say we are working with, you know, half a dozen other teams in our everyday work. Do we actually agree with how we work with each other? Yeah, potentially we might be using emails, we might be using digital collaboration tools, but we could use other things. We could be using, you know, planners, you know, like Microsoft Planner, or Kanbans like Trello, where we can actually have a shared space for perhaps goal setting or task management. It's just having these things formally agreed and set into play, and then suddenly everything is a lot more straightforward because, you know, we have an agreed space. It could even be a team set up in Microsoft Teams for specific team collaboration. And you know, if we are interacting with our teams, it puts that in there instead of some of it going in Teams, some of it going in email, some of it going somewhere else, and it just creates a bit of certainty. And I think one of the themes across all of these is expectations. It's making sure expectations are nice and clear, and it does really then, it gives us a bit more space because we've got one or two ways of work around where we collaborate, who we collaborate with, rather than, you know, dozens. So those are the six that I've just put out from here. There's, you know, there's dozens more that would work for this topic. But maybe, Hannes, if you're able to apply your digital skills and
yes, okay, so
share the poll.
Yeah, let's see.
And I just, yeah, once Jonas has got this, please just vote for whichever one you want. I think you can vote for more than one. Yay, it works. So you can vote for more than one, and yeah, just what you'd like to try. There's no right or wrong answer. They're all just, you know, different practices that.
I could say also that while we're recording, the answers are anonymous. All right, a few responses are coming in now already, 4 or 5 responses. I'm a big fan of playing games, actually, just, you know, to make sure that nobody got that wrong initially. I think playing games also has the effect sometimes of equalizing the playing field. Are you finding the same, Andrew, in your workshops?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're just trying to get a conversation, you'll find that it can be easily dominated by one or two people, but just by dealing out some cards, you know, it really evens everything out. Everybody has an equal voice, because in essence, the cards are speaking. It's nothing to, you know, they're giving people that voice, which is, it's very empowering. And you know, it doesn't have to be these particular cards. You know, you can create cards around anything. It's just coming up with almost, it can be a metaphor, or it can be just be a token that represents what you're trying to talk about. But it really does help.
All right.
Cool. It was a nice spread. Okay, so I mean, it looks like reasonably there's 3 that are kind of most popular around sharing details about how you like to work, hold your conversations in focus channels, not by email, and replace status update meetings with a threaded conversation. So it's nice to see that there's there's a few themes developing, and that's the way that in the workshops this sort of thing can work. Is we talk, and you know, 1 or 2 things come up fairly easily, and then you can say, right, well, let's make this happen. Let's embed this, and it's been created collectively rather than, you know, a top-down mandate that this is what we're going to do now, which I'm sure you've all appreciated is hard to make sustainable.
Do we have time for a question or two, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all done. So that was it in terms of the content. So yeah, please.
I know the cards are available on your website, right? People can even print them on them on their own.
Yes, you can. You can. And you can get them. You can actually get them. Like, yeah, there are some printed packs, or you can get virtual packs as well. But they're not actually on my website. They're on a partner's website in Australia. But I can.
I'll link to it in the follow-up. Any questions, comments, reflection? Those of you who are here, it's coming at the final minute. Ron, would you mind jumping in? Your quick feedback?
Sure, happy to. Very interested in the product. I see it being helpful as we work with both students remotely often and business partners remotely often. So I'm just tapping out Andrew's email to follow up and say, hey, I want to learn more. So yeah, I'm very intrigued.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, Ron. Anybody else? I can pick on more people, but we don't have to.
I really like it a lot. And a question I have is, after doing this game, it's a start of a new collaboration. But when people are implementing these interventions, do you play the game regularly to see the follow-up or the advancements?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And so the government agency work, what I did was when I finished the engagement, I left them with all the cards and the materials, and then they could roll it out with as many teams as they wanted. So they carried on the work. So what was agreed, we basically distilled everything down to a smaller set of 20 or 30 practices, and then they carry that on with other teams, and then you can revisit it annually, whatever period you want to. I think it's important to actually to redo it every, whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years. I think things are always changing. I think the goals will be changing, priorities will change. So yeah, it's very easily done because you've obviously, people have got used to this sort of these ways of work as well. So
all right, I think that's it. That's all what we had today. Thank you very much, Andrew.
No worries. No, thank you for inviting me and getting me whilst I'm still in Europe for the time being anyway.
Yes, we'll stay in touch, I hope, for sure. I think it might actually work well with the time difference, right? That's what's our afternoon is going to be just before you go to sleep, right?
It'll be, if I've got insomnia, yes.
Thank you, Andrew. Good to see everybody. Thank you for joining. And as usual, I'll share the slides if okay with you, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Recording. I'll share links to the cards. But I really like the principle that's in this, in trying to find a playful approach to improving collaboration and building digital teams. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.